One of the major stories this morning in Washington suggested that, in fact, that his speech to the NATO partners that suggested that he would invoke or at least respect the Article 5 commitments. The senior administration official told us flatly that the president himself did not take the Article 5 reference out of the speech. So, Sarah, who did?
I'm not aware of that, and I'd have to check back and let you know. Thanks, guys.
You could stay longer.
I'm Ana Cabrera in New York. You've been watching the White House press briefing. That was Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Once again, the administration forced to defend the president's tweets. This time, those tweets may end up undermining the president's own agenda on the travel ban. And he also slammed the mayor of London in his tweets just 2 days after a terror attack there. But there's another headline emerging above it all. It has to do with James Comey, the fired FBI director, who is expected to testify in 3 days. And I want to go to Gloria Borger, our CNN chief political analyst. Gloria, that was a huge headline when the White House came out and said they will not exert executive privilege.
Yeah, it is a huge headline. It means that James Comey's testimony on Thursday will go on as scheduled. It also might mean, quite frankly, that the White House knew that its case on executive privilege might be interpreted by the American public as a president that had something to hide. And it might also mean that they believe that their legal case might be diminished because the president tweets so much about James Comey and about his conversations with James Comey. Remember when he tweeted, he said, James Comey told me I was not I was not being investigated as part of the Russia investigation. So I think that all those things taken into consideration, they made the smart move, which was not to take executive privilege. I would also add that the thing that struck me about this press conference is that Sarah Huckabee spent a lot of her time trying to square a circle, which is difficult. And what she was trying to do was say that the president did not, in fact, insult the mayor of London, after he, of course, tweeted calling him pathetic. And that the president did not actually misinterpret what the mayor said, which if you read what the mayor said, which was that he didn't want his people to be alarmed by the presence of more armed police in the street, rather than don't be alarmed, period. And she stood there in a way that was astonishing to me, trying to explain that the president didn't insult the mayor, and then she went on to say that there is reason to be alarmed, as if echoing what Donald Trump meant. And you could see from the reporters' faces in there, it was astonishing.
Well, again, Crystal Liz, I want to ask you this. When you heard that response to why is the mayor picking a fight with, or why is the president picking a fight with the mayor of London following a terror attack, she straight up said he's not picking a fight. Yep. What's your reaction to how she responded?
Well, in a way, this wasn't Sean Spicer, Anna, but it was sort of the tactics that Sean Spicer has put into place over the last, couple weeks, certainly, and certainly over the last week, which is just create an alternate reality. If the questions are about X, say Y, and then just continue to defend it. Gloria is 100% right. When you call the mayor of London pathetic, and the mayor of London takes that as an insult, it's kind of hard for the White House press secretary or deputy press secretary to say, it's not an insult. This is the impossibility of trying to manage a message with Donald Trump. Remember that James Comey was fired because of that memo Rod Rosenstein wrote. Or Donald Trump tells NBC he fired him because of the Russia stuff. Over and over and over again, Donald Trump outruns attempts to manage him message-wise. It makes this job, Sean Spicer, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, any other person you could possibly think of, it makes it impossible because, as Gloria points out, you are trying to do something that cannot be done. You are trying to pretend that there's a consistency of message here that any reasoning, logical person can see simply does not exist.
And they're also saying don't read into his tweets too much. Don't overanalyze them. Laura Coates, Given that we now have on the record they're not going to invoke executive privilege, the president will not invoke executive privilege, and they say because he wants to have a swift investigation, wants to get to the facts. What did you think about them coming out and saying that he's not going to do this?
Well, it's odd that you would say, I don't intend to do what I never had the power to really do in the first place. I mean, the executive privilege is kind of a toothless animal for the President of the United States at this point. James Comey is no longer a federal employee or a subordinate of the executive branch. So really the threat looming over him to have privilege asserted would be he could be fired for insubordination. That's not an issue for a private citizen. And number two, the issues surrounding this really deal with what happened before he actually took office, presumably. So things that took place before you actually president of the United States are not under executive privilege in the first place. So the idea that he couldn't do what he couldn't do already or won't do what he couldn't do isn't really giving him a lot of credit. But on Ryan and Gloria's point, one more thing. The job who has the worst job right now is the entire Justice Department, who is trying very, very steadfastly to promote a consistent constitutional message for the travel ban, and they cannot do so at this point based on the tweeting, based on his statements, based on his pre-campaign and his now post-campaign, now presidential speech and rhetoric.
Remember, they initially had said, don't call it a travel ban. They went out of their way previously in prior months to say this isn't a ban of any sort. This is all about national security. We saw Sarah Huckabee Sanders having to try to dance around that language now. But the president this morning, if we have his tweets, guys, that we could put up, I mean, he doubled and tripled down that this is a travel ban. He even used capital letters to call it a travel ban. He even said the Justice Department should have stayed the original travel ban, not watered down politically correct version they submitted to the Supreme Court. Goes on to say the Justice Department should ask for an expedited hearing of the watered down travel ban before the Supreme Court and seek much tougher version. Let me ask you, Bob Bianchi, who's here with us, you're a prosecutor. When you're reading these tweets from the president and you are having to defend his executive order, how does that make you feel to see the president sending these tweets?
Listen, I mean, I've been saying this for a while. The increase probably in Xanax prescriptions for the attorneys that are trying to defend the Trump administration has got to be off the hook. You got DOJ going in there trying to forcefully argue the credibility of this travel ban. And then you have the president tweeting something that literally contradicts what the lawyers are going in and saying. Not only does it frustrate the constitutional case, the legal case, but like all of these guests are indicating here, and everyone is saying, as a leader of an organization, a law enforcement agency myself, it's not only important to be consistent in your actions, it's important to have a consistent message, not only so that your staff and the people that are working for you know how to act, what your vision is and what to do, but also so that the community has trust in the integrity and competence of the agency that you're running, especially from a law enforcement point of view. And I think that one of the biggest critical problems that we have right now, before we get to terrorism, before we get to soft targets, which have been around for a long time, before we get to how to target harden ourselves, is a consistent message. Without a consistent message, law enforcement can't operate. So all of these things are just, unfortunately, these communication devices speaking directly to the public are contradicting what his own administration is trying to do in court. I've never seen anything like it.
Hagar Shamali, you are a former spokesperson for the government. You are a member of the Treasury Department for Terror Financial Intelligence, specifically focusing in that area. When she came out and said, basically, don't read too much into the tweets, I forget her exact words, but you said, yeah, everything's going to be scrutinized, that what you say does matter. Welcome to government.
Absolutely. This is how Washington works. This is how it's worked for decades. And as spokespersons and those who work in communications in the government, you should be trained normally to know exactly how the American public is going to react to something, how the media is going to react to something, and you have to be a step ahead. And so I don't want to say that it's easy, that people could do it in their sleep, but usually trained communications professionals in the government who have political experience to know exactly what to say, how to say it, what means to use. And there are a lot of steps the administration makes that I find could have been much more easily explained. I mean, they get very upset at the drama that is created over how they say something when a tweet comes out. And yet I think they're the ones that need to look internally and say, okay, wait a minute. Clearly we're not going to win this battle. We need to change our communication strategy up.
And remember, so often we've heard Sean Spicer say the tweet speaks for itself when he's been asked about previous tweets from the president. But let's play some sound from some of the other administration officials who were asked about these controversial tweets just this morning. Watch.
this obsession with covering everything he says on Twitter and very little of what he does as president.
That's his preferred method of communication with the American people.
That's not true.
It's not policy.
Of course
it's
it
social
is.
media, Chris. It's social media.
It's not
You know the
social
difference,
media.
right?
It's his words, his thoughts.
It's not policy. It's not an executive order. It's social media. Please understand the difference.
Gloria Borger, should the tweets be considered official presidential statements?
Of course, they're going to be archived. These are words written by the president. Doesn't matter where they appear, as Sir Gorka says. These are words that are typed and written by the President of the United States, period. You know, and they're going to be archived as such. And you can blame the media all you want, as Sarah Huckabee Sanders said. You know, she was blaming the media for misinterpreting the president. The words are the words. The words matter. And, you know, at a certain point, you do have to take the president literally. I know during the campaign, the catchphrase was take him seriously, but not literally. But I think now that he is president, his words need to be taken literally, because not only do we look at them, but our allies look at them, our enemies look at them, they ricochet around the world in a nanosecond. And here's the mayor of London, for example, trying to lead in a time of crisis, and he's being called pathetic for a wrong reason by the President of the United States. How is that helpful? It is not helpful. And if you're working in the Department of Justice and the President of the United States criticizes you for the work you have done on the travel ban, when in fact it is your own administration, what does that do to the people who actually work for you and are trying to represent your point of view? How does it help?
He's going after his own administration this morning in some of those tweets that we just read. And we just heard from Kellyanne Conway, and her husband is weighing in on this now. Remember, George Conway was somebody who was considered for a nomination to be a senior Justice Department position. He withdrew his name just last week, but he tweeted this morning saying these tweets may make some people feel better, but they certainly won't help the general there get 5 votes in the Supreme Court, which is what actually matters. Sad. Chris Cillizza, George Conway weighing in. I wonder if he ran this tweet by Kellyanne Conway, who's part of the administration, before he sent it out.
Well, that would be interesting. Yeah, look, what George Conway is hitting on is the criticism from many people who support Donald Trump, which is he does everything with his heart and nothing with his head. Donald Trump already knows the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals has already used some of the language he's used on Twitter and in rallies against him as he tries to say the travel ban has nothing to do with Muslims. He knows that words have consequences. And I don't want to be too dismissive of Sarah Huckabee Sanders, but I do think you have to say this, Anna. You do not get to have your cake and eat it too in politics. Either Donald Trump's Twitter feed is the sort of most important way that his supporters can hear from him and he cherishes it and they will never get rid of it, or it's not a really serious thing that we in the media shouldn't pay so much attention to. Those two things that cannot be married. You cannot have both of those things be true at the same time. And that's what they're trying to do.
Go ahead, Laura.
If I could, one of the issues I think is so legally profound about Kellyanne Conway's husband tweeting, and I can't remember his first name. I hate to just give him that title.
George.
But the idea, George, thank you. The idea here is that, look, the Supreme Court just received an 800-plus page filing from the Justice Department that was trying to articulate one point, and that is the prerogative of the president to make sure that national security interests go above all else must be judged by a facially neutral document. Please don't pay attention to what he said on the campaign trail. His campaign rhetoric is irrelevant to this discussion. So what do we have now? We've got a president who no longer is candidate Trump, who is now giving more fodder to the argument that says it's not a campaign statement. It is a presidential statement that he is now making. And he never says Muslim ban. He says he wants the original travel ban to go back into effect and an even stronger one. And remember, the 4th And Ninth Circuits have already said that those offend the First Amendment of the Constitution. What he's just done is give out 8 easy buttons to the 9 Supreme Court justices and said, this is an easy call. It should remain to be not able to be implemented. I've given you the tools, the fire, and the ammunition on the wrong side of my administration.
Robert, go ahead.
The sad thing about this is the Obama administration had identified some of these countries as being problematic because of their own vetting process on the other side of the pond. And there was a legitimate, rational relationship as to why they did that. Can we imagine where we would be today had it been done for that reason? There was a consistent message that that is exactly the reason. And then when the United States feels comfortable that those countries come up to speed with regard to ensuring that they're checking on their end, that these people aren't terrorists, we would be in a completely different space. This is all created because of the continued and unbelievably amazing tweets that are coming out, as you've indicated, contradicting his own lawyers that are making this argument. It would have been a completely different situation. So if the reason for this ban, or whatever you want to call it, was for those 8 or 9 countries, whatever it was, it's
6 countries are in the amended ban.
Then it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that if there's a quote-unquote constitutional, rational relationship for them to have made this argument to make us safer, that we are where we are right now because of this incessant tweeting that contradicts that message.
And those 6 countries, by the way, are Syria, Iran, Yemen, Libya, Somalia, and Sudan. We're just learning in this most recent attack in London, they've identified 2 of the attackers. And one was a British citizen born in Pakistan. The other, who they don't have his exact origin at the moment, but they say claimed to be from Moroccan and Libyan. 2 of those 3 countries that I just listed aren't even on this ban. What are the merits of the safety element of this ban that the president says this is all about?
Right. You've hit the nail on the head. I mean, I think not only are some of those countries not on the ban, but when Sarah Huckabee Sanders goes out and says that the president's priority is the national security of the United States and protecting citizens, that's a great priority. That's a good goal to have.
And she said the need for this executive order is very clear.
And that's impossible for them to prove, because when you've looked at an attack like you had in London, or the attacks previously in Manchester, in Paris, in Nice, in San Bernardino, in Orlando, in Boston, the pattern with all of them is homegrown extremism. Some of them had emigrated 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. A number of them are born in the country, but they all have the same pattern. These are young, mostly disenfranchised youth who are influenced over social media most of the time. They travel to the region, which should be a red flag.
Before you book, check on Trivago. Trivago compares live prices from more than 150 different websites to make sure that you find the best price for your ideal hotel.